Today's guest is one of the most iconic photographers in NBA history. Nat Butler has spent 4 decades capturing the league's biggest moments and biggest stars, from Michael Jordan to LeBron James. His work has graced magazine covers, championship celebrations, and now the pages of his new book, Courtside, 40 Years of NBA Photography. Nat and I go way back, having worked together for 12 years during my time in NBA entertainment. I'm thrilled to catch up and relive some of the stories behind your legendary images.
No, thanks, David. That's quite the flattering intro. Thank you.
The book is beautiful. There are some real personal favorites of mine in there. We could talk all day about each one. To me, one of the most iconic images is the Bill Russell one with all his championship rings in his,
Right.
the palm of his hand. 10 fingers, 11 rings. I thought that's the one I always remember seeing everywhere.
Right. No, that was a big thrill for me, personally. I never saw, him play. It was kind of a no-brainer. How do you signify someone who wins 11 championships? So it was the 10 fingers, 11 rings. But the crazy story was that he didn't get ring for every championship back in those days.
Really?
It's a crazy story that we had to borrow rings from some of his teammates and some of the front office people, because after he got a couple of rings, they would give other gifts. And there's a little bit of like folklore, legend, what's true, what's not true. We were trying to find out. But one year they got cufflinks, they got a watch. There was a rumor that one year they got a Zenith TV because the Celtics had a sponsorship deal with Zenith, those old, huge, 6-foot long cabinets that had a
Right.
TV in it. But he, in fact, did not get 11 rings. So we borrowed from his teammates and stuff. When you think back on it, like the ring culture now, could you imagine it's my 4th or 5th championship. I don't need a ring. I got a tie clip or a watch or a couple. It's so crazy, right?
It is crazy how much things have changed. When I was editing, when I first started out, it was 3/4 inch tape. But I remember that I really befriended you, the photographers of the NBA, because you actually made my life easier when you were cutting with 3/4 inch tape. Because what you would always do is you would cue up to the flash, the photographer flash, and then you could go to a different angle and cue up to that same flash, and then roll back the tape and make an angle cut
Right.
based on the flash. So you made sure that your edit was completely in time. So, Nat, what first inspired you to pick up a camera? And kind of second on that question, how did you gravitate towards sports photography, specifically basketball?
You know what? I was a huge sports fan growing up. I was always interested in photography. I would like race to the mailbox to get my Sports Illustrated every Thursday, look at the pictures, read the articles. And then when I went to St. John's in the 80s, I just started taking pictures for the school newspaper. I used to do other sports. I love tennis. I would shoot football occasionally, baseball, but it just sort of segued into, primarily basketball.
Right. So when you went to St. John's, was that the Lou Carnesecca, Chris Mullin years?
Exactly. Chris Mullin, Walter Berry, Mark Jackson. I remember 1985. I had just graduated, but 3 out of the 4 Final Four teams were Big East teams. The Big East in the 80s was the place to be. Madison Square Garden, the Big East tournament, that was really the place to be for college basketball.
And how did you transition from St. John's to the NBA?
In school, I had done some internships with Sports Illustrated. I did an internship with the NBA. NBA Entertainment had started a couple years prior, and we sort of put our heads together and said, hey, they're doing this great stuff with video. We should do the same thing with still photography. The powers that be were David Stern and his crew were like really adamant about preserving the history of the NBA. So it was great timing for me. I would source material during the day, AP, UPI, some different newspapers, creating an NBA library, and then at night go to games and create new content.
So looking back over 4 decades, has your creative process and approach evolved as the league and technology has changed since you began?
Oh, sure. The equipment, I mentioned in the book, one of the early shots that I was proud of. There's a Magic Johnson sky hook. It was Game 4, 1987 NBA Final, but literally taking the photo, game ends, running to the hotel to develop the film. I would make a little dark room in the in the bathroom of the hotel, hang with clothespins up in the shower, looking at the film, to now I click the button, the images go to the headquarters in Secaucus, and they could be on NBA Instagram in under a minute, and they have like 85 million followers or something crazy.
Yeah. So what's your philosophy on capturing emotion, both excitement and jubilation and heartbreak?
You know, I love those moments. Yes, there's beautiful dunks and jumpers and a dribble drive or something, but I love just the raw emotion. One of my favorite shots, and he made a comment that it was one of his favorite, was Iverson going like this to the crowd, screaming to the crowd. You know, he was so much fun to shoot because of his energy, his passion. And sometimes it is difficult in a single image to capture that. You know, you don't have a sequence of something like a video, but just that one moment. You know, there was a shot that we couldn't get into the book, that it was after the deadline, was just when the Celtics won the title in 24, of JT lifting up Deuce, you know, and
The
that
sun.
shot was everywhere. I
Right.
wanted to try to, you know, get that in, but we had missed the deadline. You know, the deadline was prior to that. But the emotion of that, you know, as a parent, him sharing that moment with his son, things like that are just so special to me.
Do you have a favorite, like the LeBron the block with when he was back on the Cavs?
Right.
That's a pretty famous image that was caught with one of the cameras, mounted cameras on the backboard.
Right, right. And that was so, like, time and place are so important, right? That was game 7 of the NBA finals. It wasn't like a regular game in January or February. And that was, you know, typically I'll sit on one side of the court, set up remote cameras on the other side. It still bothers me a little. We're talking about milliseconds of the moment. On that play, I've seen the video a million times. Mike Breen's call. If you notice, like, Andre Iguodala does bobble the ball a little bit, and my shot, like, LeBron's hand is up, but I wanted him like pinning the ball on the backboard. But
Right.
that millisecond of Andre bobbling the ball, and, you know, I take the shot, because if you're looking through the camera and you see it, you're already too late. You
Right.
know, you have to have the anticipation. So I knew you could see him, what he was going to do. So I hit the button, but literally probably, you know, a thousandth of a second or something, without him bobbling the ball, it would have been a nice pin on the backboard. But the anticipation is sort of cool because everyone has seen the video, you know?
Right. Right. So when you're seeing that play, you're not looking down at your camera following the action. You're looking down court, ready to press the button for the.
You know what? I have a camera that I'm looking through the camera,
Yeah.
and I have a system where I use auxiliary little buttons that we have sort of refined over the years. So I'll use, like, looking through the camera, I'll hit one button for this, another button for the remote cameras and things.
Well, I'm looking at the video and I see 3 flashes on that play, and yours is the last flash. What's the story behind your most famous shot?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if there's one specific, you know, shot. We talked about the Bill Russell shot. You know, if you're a Knicks fan, people like the John Starks dunk.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Ewing jumped up on the table at the Garden. That was to get to the finals. It wasn't in the finals. There's a Kobe shot of him with the trophy in the locker room, just sitting there, totally spent. Similarly, more recently, there was a Steph Curry shot that I loved, of him sitting in front of his locker. He's got the MVP trophy, the Larry O'Brien trophy, and then he did a quick little night in front of his locker. I literally took one frame, because that was it. He was done with all his media. He was exhausted. He was getting ready to take a shower. It was probably, you know, close to 2 hours after the game. He just finally sat down in a quiet moment and did boom. Those moments, again, I'm a fan, and I think they have the legs to stand the test of time.
It's great. So not every moment goes viral, but that doesn't mean it's not worth capturing. So how do you balance shooting for impact versus shooting for meaning?
You know what? It's another great question. You know, during a normal game, we are tasked with documenting the game, but for different games, we have different responsibilities. You know, there could be a player that has been injured. It's his first game back. We need content on that player. He's debuting a new sneaker. So you get an email from Nike or one of the NBA partners. We need this. Or if it's a blowout, And some of the guys are getting in the game that typically don't play a lot. We need imagery of those guys, for some of the partners within the NBA, whether it's, for the Topps trading cards or something like that. There's always different specifics that we need, and then the game will take on a life of its own within those parameters.
You've built a visual archive of basketball history through your imagery. At WSC, we help our partners build their own content libraries as well. But how do you think about the long-term value of moments, not just now, but years later, looking back?
I think it's hugely important, and even outside of the sports world, right? You can't go back and recreate a live event, certainly. In our digital age now, certain things have gotten a little easier in terms of the archiving, the cataloging, the storing, but that's so important. In the old days, we had film. You'd go into the filing cabinet and get a piece of film. Now if you're typing in a keyword in a search engine, you want to find those images, and it has a lasting impact because you are documenting. In our case, you're documenting history. Some games are more important than others, but you never know when you're going to need to access that information. And similarly, I'm sure for some of your clients, you need to have that a high quality archive in place that you can then access that imagery.
Yeah, for sure. So whether it's a piece of footage or an image, not every moment is equal. What tells you something is worth capturing before it even plays out?
You know what? That's where it's the time and place of a particular game. Like I've referenced, NBA finals are more important than a game in January, unless it's some kind of crazy, matchup or something. And then within that game, there are different moments. But even having said that, the first time Cooper Flag goes up against Victor Wembanyama,
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
is cool. And it doesn't have to be like the craziest peak action moment. It could be them at center court. I have a picture of LeBron and Melo the first time they played, right? Just leaning over on their shorts talking, hey, that during a free throw, right? Victor Wembanyama talking to Cooper Flag, like, okay, so you take that picture, you archive that picture 10 years from now when they're legends and this is their first meeting. Look at how they've changed, or look at, how far they've come. That kind of stuff I think is cool in terms of the storytelling, right? Having those images and having those easily accessible is hugely important.
Yeah, having the content easily accessible is really key because as a producer, you don't want to spend like 3 days looking for content. You want it available so you can look at it immediately. I think that's why I'm such a big fan of technology, art technology specifically, and how easy it makes it to find great content and
Right.
great imagery to put into your pieces. So, how much of your work is shaped by how fans will remember the moment? And does that kind of align of how you experience it in real time? Like when you take a shot, do you know like, oh, this is going to be a good one?
You do, but there's different levels of importance. A game winner or something is more significant than others. I like the matchups between the players, certain stars or whatever. That's always fun. The crowd reaction to a specific play. And things are very different now with digital and social media. I could be at a game and a play happens. I'm still working the game and my phone blowing up or something because NBA put out a picture in the second quarter of a crazy play, you
Of
know?
your image, like live while the game was
Yeah,
going.
exactly.
Yeah.
And even having said that, the fans now at a game, if they're filming on their phone and they put it out on their personal account, a larger account can pick that up and blow that up. So things have changed drastically in that regard, and those things can become viral very quickly.
Yeah, that's one thing that we do at WSC Sports is that we're all about scale and helping our partners being able to deliver content, in real time all over the world, basically. So our work is about scale, but your work is all about precision. You kind of mentioned it in your last answer, but how do you think the two approaches influence the type of moments fans see and remember?
Well, you need, again, great insight. You need a team, right? If I'm there at the game shooting, we have people, back of house doing their job, an editor and people pushing stuff out in a live fashion. So that's important. You need to be in sync with those people. Like a crazy play kind of speaks for itself, right? But I think it's important if I'm at a game and the editors have the game on TV, they're watching the live feed of mine coming in. They're watching if the announcers of the game are talking about something obscure during the course of the game, they can then look for that immediately and push that out there, because that could be something that I'm not aware of, or they hit me with a quick text, get a quick shot of this while you're able to. So the communication between a team is hugely important.
So you're basically, when you're shooting a game, you're in constant communication with that team.
We are. Some guys are more than I. To be honest, I tell them not to bother me unless it's important, because I look up and I see people down the other end of the court. Everyone's on their phone. Like, I don't want to do that and miss something. So if it's important, I'll look at. I have alert set to my watch that I'll look at it during a timeout and look at, because that's the world we live in. I have to be honest. Sometimes there's a big celebrity at a game and might not be in my wheelhouse if I know who this particular person is. And they say, nah, just get a couple of shots of so-and-so, sitting courtside down the other end or something, something as simple as that. And I might not be up to speed on who the latest TikTok star is, but there's always communication. I think that's important.
Well, we're here with Nathaniel Butler. Nat, your book, Courtside, 40 Years of NBA Photography, your last answer about shooting celebrities kind of segues into, you have to have two sets of skills, because you're a game photographer is what you're known for. But what's also really great in the book are all these portraits that you do of players, both in uniform, like, for example, the Dream Team, the All-Star Games, the NBA 50 and 75. And then you have some great portraits of some players in street clothes by basketball courts, like the Tim Duncan or the Wilt Chamberlain. Tell me about which one do you prefer? Because they seem like they're two sets of skills that you need to have.
I appreciate that. I do kind of pride myself on being, well-rounded in that regard. And I do enjoy both, because in the game, it's the heat of the moment. You do your stuff. But then in a portrait, I love thinking it out ahead of time. I love the execution of doing a portrait and coming away with something that, you can be proud of and that will, have legs over time. So I really do enjoy both. I worked as an apprentice and assistant at Sports Illustrated when I was first starting out, and I learned some of the lighting techniques from some of their masters. And that was like an invaluable experience for me, both, doing action things, but the portraits as well. I love that Tim Duncan portrait.
Why is that?
I always loved. Tim Duncan was known for his little bank shot, right? But he played his high school games outside.
He was from
St. Croix. So his high school basketball court was literally 100 yards from the ocean. So it was always windy. So there's a higher percentage. Instead of shooting for a swish, you bank it. So he became known for his bank shot, and he developed that at a young age when he was in high school. And that particular photo is one of my favorites, like an environmental portrait of him on his high school basketball court.
Where he learned his game. That's the actual court where he learned that move that made him a superstar.
Exactly. And I love like I said, the storytelling, I think, is an important component with a lot of, social media things now, being able to tell a story and having, something that people might not really know and listen and learn about, something like that. And that, as a fan, I think that I love the picture, but the story behind the photo, I think, is very intriguing as well. One of the things that I did like about the book was that I sort of had the players do the captions for their photos.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a little unique hook, like John Starks talks about his thoughts about the dunk. Someone like LeBron was crazy gracious, and we sat down. Dave McMenamin, the author, who's been a friend for many years, and he sat down with LeBron. They talked about the different photos. So just going through the book, you look at the pictures, you put it down, you pick it up, and then start reading about the quotes of the players' thoughts about those moments, I think is a cool little little hook for basketball fans.
Yeah, it's good. It's really, really entertaining. If you're an NBA fan, you're going to love this book.